It has been 4 months since my last full-length devlog for Malevolent Star. I decided to take a little break from the game, and I didn't do very much, so I don't have very much progress to report. Just kidding! I added the moon and stars, more ouchie effects on the heads-up display, R2-D2 exercising his Second Amendment rights, explosions, more explosions, crackheads with knives, made the plasma carbine not look atrocious, made the first section of the level not look like someone put a sand-textured top sheet over a Lego set. And what's this? You can play the freaking game on Steam right now, and so much more, which I will explain in artistic detail starting now. Let's start with the grenades. I couldn't decide between bouncy grenade and sticky grenade, so I made it do both. It sticks to energy shields, bounces off of everything else. The grenades are especially helpful for dealing with the red room, which is the room in which the door closes behind you and 6 shielded enemies spawn in front of you. This room was quite frustrating for playtesters, especially because
Let me tell you something!
They can punch you now. So having grenades helps out a lot. A well-placed grenade in front of a mech also functions as an effective cannon pour. Now let's talk about some of the visual improvements to the game. I already mentioned my favorite, that being the new textures on the plasma carbine, which instantly elevated this weapon from being the ugliest gun in the game to my personal favorite by appearance alone. The plasma carbine always had a decent silhouette, but from the first-person perspective, the silhouette doesn't matter, and instead this ugly-looking gray block and its surrounding bareness is what took up most of the screen. But with the retexture, the magazine area becomes the most visually interesting part of the weapon. I also added some particle effects for the reload animation. On the topic of cool particles, shooting at enemy shields is now extremely satisfying because of the shield damage particle effects. And on the topic of satisfying, these new damage particles on the mech's rivets are also pretty neat. And on the topic of pretty neat, behold, purple planet, moon, sun, stars, and distant mountains. It turns out that you can just throw some spheres and procedural materials at Blender, slap the render button, and then you get a pretty neat skybox. I remodeled the first section of the level to achieve a more stylized low poly look. This is the 3rd time that I have remodeled this section, as it took me a few tries to figure out the best workflow for creating natural terrain in this style. But I'm finally pleased with the result. I will probably add more props and scenery to this section later, but I think this will be the final iteration of the base terrain. Last on the list of visual improvements are the new and updated elements of the heads-up display. The damage overlay that appears around the screen was added to give the player a stronger indication of how much damage they've taken. I also updated the ammo display with custom designs for each weapon. This came along with a much larger refactor of the weapon system that I will also talk about in more detail. In my last devlog, I mentioned that good shooter games usually have a variety of enemies of different shapes and sizes. Because I'm lazy, I was indecisive about how many kinds of enemies I would create, preferring to just add lots of variations on the main boy. And indeed, there will be many variations on the main boy, but nonetheless, there must be at least a few entirely different enemy designs in the game. And the mech, while very cool in its own way, cannot appropriately be placed in most of the ordinary combat encounters, which is where the additional variety is most needed. He's more like a mini-boss. So, little guys, they sleep, they wake, they shoot, they recharge, and then they shoot again, and then they recharge again, and then they shoot. So the aliens have supplemented their infantry with gun Roombas and made the extremely questionable tactical decision to have them recharge their blasters at these quite volatile batteries. Whenever you encounter some robots docked at one of these batteries, the ones that are docked will not wake up unless awoken by another robot. The sleeping and waking mechanic and the volatility of the batteries gives the player a few options for dealing with these guys. First, you can shoot the batteries, blowing up all the sleeping robots and any other enemies who happen to be in the blast radius. In order for this to be a viable strategy, you must either be relatively close and have a plasma carbine and a few seconds to spare, or you must have a plasma bolter with at least 2 shots in it. Alternatively, you can shoot the awake robots, causing the sleeping ones to remain sleeping. Or, the simplest option is to just let them all wake up and then fight them all. I do not expect players to fully understand the first 2 options on an initial playthrough, but nonetheless, the encounters in the first level are arranged to hopefully demonstrate the robot's behavior, so the player can learn to take advantage of it later. Another significant change is the improved enemy AI. These improvements did not come about by a complete rethinking of the AI's design or an overhaul of its implementation. Instead, I identified a few issues and thought carefully about how best to fix them. The result was 3 big improvements which, when combined, made the standard enemy's behavior a lot better. The first improvement had to do with the enemy's engagement distance. This sounds like a small matter, but I found that it was one of the biggest reasons why enemies often felt robotic, ineffective in certain situations, and easy to manipulate. When enemies detect the player, depending on their distance, they will do one of 3 things. If they are too far away, they will seek cover to avoid getting picked off from a distance. If they are close, they will immediately engage, entering their skirmish state, wherein they shoot, strafe, and occasionally stand still. But if the distance is somewhere in the middle, they will run toward the player, engaging and switching to their skirmish state at a certain distance. Originally, this was a fixed distance at which they would always engage, but I found that when this distance was too close, the result was that they would run in a straight line at the player, taking too long to start shooting and strafing, and could easily be gunned down without fighting back. But if this distance was too far away, then they would all stop together as one great ineffective bunch too far beyond their weapon's effective range. For a while, I tried to find the sweet spot, but eventually I discovered that there was no sweet spot. With the engagement distance fixed at any near to mid distance, the awkward behavior associated with one extreme or the other would often present itself depending on the situation. So I realized that the solution was to make enemies engage at varying distances. The idea is simple. If the player is already taking fire and suppressed, enemies should be bolder about advancing closer before engaging. But if the player is not at all preoccupied by incoming fire, then the first approaching enemy does well to lay down some suppressive fire even if he must do so from slightly beyond his weapon's most optimal range. This allows his trailing allies to advance closer and prevents him from allowing the player multiple uncontested seconds to gun him down while he runs in a straight line like an idiot. I implemented suppression by making it so that combatants, including the player, have a hidden suppression value between 0 and 1. When an enemy shoots at a combatant, it bumps their suppression value by some amount regardless of whether the shots actually hit. After a very short delay without any more suppressing events, the suppression value will start to go back down to 0. NPCs read their target's suppression value as they're advancing and use it to determine the optimal engagement distance. This solution addressed the issue better than I could have hoped for. Enemies felt reactive at distance while not hesitating to bring the fight closer. Additionally, they bunched up less and became harder to manipulate. That was a lot of explanation. The next improvement is a lot simpler. Now, whenever 2 enemies engage the player and they're in a line, instead of getting shot in the back by his ally, the one in front will simply move over. Really advanced stuff, I know. It's a pretty obvious solution, but again, it was very effective. This not only reduces friendly fire among the enemies, but further prevents them from bunching up and gives them one more occasion to strafe while shooting. The third change is similarly straightforward. Instead of all enemies engaging the player in the same way, only the 2 nearest enemies will pursue the player aggressively, rushing in for melee attacks and pushing cover. The rest will still fight the player at almost the same distance, but they'll stay just a little farther and will not push cover. This change is less about preventing awkward behavior and more about separating the enemies into natural roles. It makes sense for some of them to support from a distance and stay near cover, while others act as the primary aggressors. The weapon system refactor was the largest effort of all, yet produced one of the smallest changes to the actual gameplay. Besides the changes of the heads-up display that I mentioned earlier and fixing some slight jank with the weapons, such as weapons failing to reload when out of ammo, or slight desync between the animations and their accompanying sounds, the changes are almost entirely under the hood. But those under the hood changes are huge. The previous implementation of the weapon system was a horrible, impossible to maintain pile of garbage that came about from my frustration with GDScript's lack of interfaces and my terrible attempt to make the weapons modular and component-based. The resulting mess of over-engineered nonsense was more difficult to work with than anything I might have come up with if I wasn't overthinking it so much. This time, before I started, I listed several design goals for the weapon system and then decided on an implementation that satisfied all of them. Now the process of creating new weapons is easier and more intuitive, which will help me as I add new ones for the rest of the game. It will also be extremely useful for modders if I add mod support someday. And besides all of that, there are still lots more changes that I have made since the last devlog, but I'm now too anxious to finish editing this video to want to talk about them at any great length. So here's the lightning round. I added an options menu. I added tutorial text. I added gameplay tips. I bought this microphone off of Amazon with a Christmas gift card and recorded 100% of the sounds in the game with random things in my house and random effects and distortions. Fun fact, the carbine gunshot sound was made by thumping my Bible in my hand. I added difficulty selections. I changed how energy shields work so that when you break through an enemy's shields, the shields do not shatter completely like they used to, but instead they just allow you to continue shooting through the hole you made. And finally, I hired this absolute legend to cook up some awesome music for me. Campbell is an extremely talented music composer who loves making music for video games. Working with him on Malevolent Star's music has been great because he shows a tremendous amount of passion and interest in the games that he makes music for. He understands my vision for my game almost better than I do, and has had no problem with translating my vague directions into the perfect soundtracks for my game. So far he has made 2 tracks for the main menu and the first level, but I'm looking forward to working with him on the rest of the game's soundtrack too. As a solo developer determined to do everything myself, music is the one thing that I cannot do myself, so I'm extremely lucky to have a guy like this to do it for me. Alright, that's all. Now go and sign up for the playtest and roast my game. I need more feedback to make Malevolent Star as good as it can be. See you later.